Welcome. My name is Eric Fine, and this talk is sponsored by the Yale Center for Environmental Communication at the Yale School of the Environment. The Center for Environmental Communication, or YCEC for short, focuses on 4 areas. We conduct research on the psychological, cultural, and political factors that influence environmental attitudes and behavior. We teach students and train working professionals. We convene a global network of climate communication scholars and practitioners. And finally, we inform and engage public through journalism, including Yale Environment 360, focusing on environmental reporting and analysis, and the exclusively climate-focused Yale Climate Connections, which engages many thousands of people every day and includes a short daily radio story that airs on more than 700 radio stations nationwide and also some internationally. As for logistics, the chat is closed. Please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen and be aware that you'll only see your question. We are monitoring the question, so be assured your question will be seen. We will be making a recording of this conversation available on our website, and we will send a link to everyone who registered. Today's talk will be moderated by Miranda Massie, who is the director and founder of the Climate Museum, the first museum in the US dedicated to the climate crisis. In 2014, she left a career in social justice law to start laying the groundwork for this museum. As a civil rights impact litigator, her multiple honors include a Harvard Law School Wasserstein Public Interest Fellowship and a mentorship in residence at Yale Law School. Her board service has included a Head Start organization for migrant farm families and the Center for Popular Democracy. Miranda was also a 2021 fellow in our Public Voices Fellowship on the Climate Crisis. Miranda, I hand it over to you.
Well, first, let me say what an honor and a pleasure it is to be here with all of you at the Yale Center for Environmental Communications, which has been central to our work, and I believe to the work of the 2 extraordinary museum leaders and cultural institutional leaders who will be joining us today. It's just really a joy to be discussing these critical issues with you all, and I can't thank you enough, Eric and team, for convening this critical conversation as the climate crisis accelerates. And we know that there's so much power that cultural institutions have to help us move things forward. Let me say a couple of brief words about Jen Kretser and Nan Renner, who again, it's wonderful to be connecting with you all in this way. Jen directs climate initiatives at the Yale Center in the Adirondacks and leads the center's climate change engagement programs, including the new Climate Solutions exhibition and the Global Youth Climate Program, which got a special shout out from the Obama White House. She's also led the Yale Center's Youth Climate Delegation to the COP26 climate conference, and you can read more about her online. She is a superstar and a good friend and a true leader in this critical field. Nan is the Senior Director of Strategic Partnerships at Birch Aquarium at Scripps, and she's worked with UC San Diego Create on climate champions, connecting people of all ages, university, K-12, and community for climate education, action, and justice. She's a member of the California Environmental Literacy Initiative Leadership Council, which aims to strengthen the statewide network that delivers these critical programs and more. And again, Nan has a big footprint online. I encourage you to check out both of these leaders and their work, and to be inspired by it, as I have been and will continue to be. I'm now going to present for about 10 minutes a brief overview of the current exhibition that the Climate Museum has up, and then use some images from that show to additionally highlight some of the reasons why all 3 of us, in my understanding, agree that museums and cultural institutions are such a critical field for this kind of work. So Joshua, if you could bring up my slides, please. I'm not seeing them, but that doesn't mean they're not there in my experience.
I believe that was someone else, but I will.
We'll be right there with the slides. This is a show. This is our first. We're very excited about this show in institutional terms for everybody's information. It's the first time that we're still a very new institution, particularly compared to the Yale Center and the aquarium. And this is our first transit accessible pop-up in Manhattan. We've had wonderful shows across the 5 boroughs of New York City, including in particular on Governor's Island. But this is the first time we've had our own space, very subway accessible, which is critically important to our mission. And we are really excited to share it with you all. So here's an exterior view. We went up in October. Next slide, please. Moving into the show. We explain on this first wall the essential experience that people can expect. First, an immersion in a major new work of climate arts, and next, an invitation to think in a collective and community-based way about climate action. Here's an image of this extraordinary mural constructed out of vintage postcards. Each postcard becomes a pixel in a larger landscape that depicts a dystopian possible future if we don't all get our act together and in a hurry. Even though the subject matter of this piece is dark, because it is beautiful and interesting and filled with incident and detail and humor, it opens people up in a really profound way to the invitation that follows, and that I'll show you in a moment, to think of themselves as having immense climate agency, as being climate protagonists. And what we've found is that the aesthetic quality of art, and by the way, that aesthetic call in all of us is the product of a genetic mutation. It differentiates us from Neanderthals, is built into who we are. And that's part of why there are cave drawings on the walls of some of our first homes. The arts are a critical part of how we understand ourselves as a communal and connected species, as a community. And if we feel alone facing the climate crisis, there's no sense in trying to do anything because we're definitionally outscaled. If we're part of a community, that's different. So arts has been our mechanism for getting to that sense of community and connection. You'll hear from Jen and Nan, that there are many other ways to do this, but this has been our sweet spot. So next slide, please. After people take in this beautiful work of art, they are encouraged, next slide, to engage with social science and interpretation, all of which is based on research carried out by Yale and its partners in the 6 America surveys and the other research that Yale and others have done on climate communications and climate opinion. So this wall that you see behind the speaker in the foreground, that's Professor Olufemi Taiwo, who did a wonderful talk on climate reparations at the museum. That wall of text that you see behind him is about the myth of American climate indifference. We see 67% of American adults support very aggressive scale action on climate, from the Green New Deal to reparative payments to sacrifice zone communities, which are low-income white communities and all communities of color, essentially, that have been treated as places that can be polluted without jeopardy. 67% of Americans, that's a bigger supermajority than abortion support or than support for unqualified voting rights, want to see this action, but none of us feel like we do. And that's because we all ubiquitously in every state underestimate the degree of support for the climate action we need by half. So we feel outnumbered, and there's a spiral of climate silence that emerges out of that. And the point of this show is to help people bust the myth of American climate indifference and break that climate silence. Next slide, please. We then invite visitors to take a number of different climate actions. Here, you see people writing postcards, which are replicas of the postcards in the mural that you saw earlier. So there's a referentiality that makes it sticky and interesting. All you have to do is write the name of the official you want to address. That could be President Joe Biden, it could be your senator, it could be a local council member. We figure out the rest and put the stamp on it and send it. Next slide, please. And then in addition to some other actions that you could take on site, there's a climate action commitment wall where stickers help people visualize how their own individual actions become collective and inspire others, creating ripples of change and climate discourse and climate engagement. So for the sticker wall, you can choose among a varied range of options, including calling your bank and demanding an end to financing climate chaos, to talking climate and just simply busting the myth of indifference that we all confront. And that's so stultifying and just unhealthy emotionally on an individual level, as well as unhealthy for the society and for policy. There are a range of different ways that we suggest people get involved. And then most importantly, we emphasize, find your own form of climate protagonism. Don't stop with this list. Use it to get started thinking concretely about things you can do, and then the sky will be the limit. Now, briefly, I want to talk, next slide, please, Joshua, about why this works, both at the Climate Museum and at the aquarium and at the Wild Center. Cultural institutions are deeply trusted. In this slide, we learn, and this is very recent research. I'm going to look over at the name of the survey. It's the National Awareness, Attitudes, and Usage Study. It's more than 230,000 adults in the US. And the orange bar shows trust over on the left, shows trust in museums. This is also, in our experience and observation, equivalent for other cultural institutions like zoos and aquaria. The trust has increased since the pandemic. Blue is pre-pandemic. Why? Because being together in space with other human beings reminds us that we're not alone. Next slide, please. One pertinent finding from this for the rest of our discussion: people sometimes feel anxious about suggesting action to our visitors. As museum professionals, we're so happy there are so many museum professionals in this audience. It's wonderful. In fact, 3/4 of American adults support our recommending actions that are consistent with our mission. And in other previous studies, it's been shown that that recommendation enhances trust in cultural institutions. It doesn't degrade it. I think that's a super key finding. Next slide, please. Museums are incredibly popular. The research I have is a little bit out of date, but when you compare museum visitation to major sports league attendance, amusement parks, et cetera, we do really, really, really well. Next slide. Museums are places for community gathering. This was a wonderful event held by an organization called Black Girl Environmentalist, and they hosted a reception about Black women and environmental activism and the arts. It was a lovely evening, and because we have this space, again, going back to the space that cultural institutions offer, it could feel like a collective moment of advance. Next slide. In museums and cultural institutions, we learn with each other socially and emotionally. You can see the vivid intensity on the face of the woman making the gesture with her hand. Next slide, please. The learning is voluntary. Here's 2 middle school kids flipping through a book together. So being able to choose to learn is quite different. And final slide. Again, back to the sticker wall, which we found worked really well. We absolutely 100% lifted this idea from Yayoi Kusama's obliteration room at the Tate Modern, and saw that the stickers she used there were a way of creating community, among other things. But there are many other modes of doing this. The main takeaway is that museums are catalysts for change. And in this moment of intensifying crisis, we cannot afford to leave those superpowers on the ground. We have to pick them up and mobilize them. Thank you all so much for your attention. And I'm so excited to hear your presentation, Jen, and then yours, Nan, and to go into our Q&A section.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nan Renner, delighted to be here with you today. Greetings from San Diego and the land of the Kumeyaay. The Beister family Little Blue Penguins exhibition opened at Birch Aquarium at Scripps last summer, 2022. And since then, every day, countless times, we hear, they're so cute, and they are so cute, and so much more. Humans are emotional animals, and emotion is a gateway to memory. So we deliberately mapped out our desired emotional experience, including where climate messaging fits in. We start where people already are, joy and delight, and we want them to fall in love with Little Blue Penguins and want to know more about them. We channel that love into care and care into action. So let's dive in, and we'll start with joy and delight. In our exhibits and presentations, we encourage people to pay attention, to observe and notice what makes Little Blue Penguins special. Little Blue Penguins don't fly in the air, but they fly in the water. Notice how they're dark on their backs and light on their bellies. This counter shading makes it difficult for predators to see them from above or below when they're in the water. Their paddle-shaped wings and webbed feet enable them to swim and dive with great efficiency, even if they look awkward on land. And their tightly packed feathers insulate them while they swim for long periods. Our team feeds them by hand to keep track of everyone's intake, and they eat a lot. I hope that little video gave you a sense of the experience in the exhibition. Our Little Blue Penguins eat a lot and they poop a lot. We have lots of fun facts in our exhibit and in all of our communications. And here you can see that their scientific name, Eudiptula minor, means good little diver and celebrates their excellent diving ability and all their amazing hydrodynamic adaptations. Our communications campaign on site and in marketing and social media focuses first on the animals. That's a big reason why people come to Birch Aquarium. Our team loves these birds, and we want everyone to love them too. Telling climate stories isn't bait and switch. When we love animals and want to get to know them better, we want to know about their lives, and climate change affects their lives. We've designed the exhibit so guests can feel immersed in the penguins' world and learn about where they come from. Children and adults want to know about their home. Little penguins come from Southern Australia and New Zealand, a temperate climate much like ours in San Diego. And kids love to hug and kiss the little penguin sculptures on this bench. Here they're posing for a photo op in front of a photo from Southern Australia. On our amazing adaptations wall, you can see how present-day challenges threaten little penguins' survival. For example, heat waves in the ocean can force little blues to swim twice as far and twice as deep to find cold water fish. Sometimes they can't catch enough food. The parents that forage at sea and the chicks back in the nest can go hungry. In extreme cases, they may starve. We touch on how the industry that supplies fossil fuels does damage to the things we love. We believe that love can engender care, and under the right conditions, the will to protect. We aim to inspire climate action and highlight the benefits for people, penguins, and our living planet. So we created a climate action wall, drawing on the National Network of Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation. We deployed strategies that they have tested and refined. Strategic framing involves how ideas connect with other ideas and how we provide context and orientation for our guests. Here we use multiple frames. For example, an orientation toward action. Many people share the value that protecting wildlife is good, and we need to take action to do that. We also use the heat trapping blanket metaphor to remind people of the mechanism of global warming. And we briefly explain the consequences of warming and the most important solution to reduce and ultimately eliminate our use of fossil fuels. We want to catalyze conversations to break the climate silence. So we created a prompt and a set of conversational topics. These topics point to collective action, solutions, and benefits. And with this approach, we seek to mainstream the climate conversation. We weave information about evidence, causes, consequences, and actions to speak to people across the spectrum of global warming's 6 Americas, from alarmed and concerned to cautious, disengaged, doubtful, and dismissive, drawing on work from our colleagues at Yale. And like Miranda said, we know that the majority of people are concerned and alarmed, and those people want to know about solutions and actions. Our design experiment is a work in progress. In this narrow physical space where the climate action wall is, people primarily turn their attention toward the penguins, and we want more people to spend more time reading and talking about climate action. So we will continue to experiment and extend climate content and experiences into other spaces where there's more room and less competition for attention. Our people at the aquarium, our amazing educators and husbandry team, play a key role in conveying climate messaging and how ocean warming affects little blue penguins. So it's not just in the exhibit panels, it's in the presentations. And through these presentations and interactions, they convey our exhibition's big idea, that little blue penguins and other seabirds express the health of Earth systems, and our future is tied to theirs. To wrap up, our exhibit design expresses these imperatives. We need action. We need urgent action. We need love. Love is what keeps us together and inspires us to take action. And we need joy. To quote the poet Ross Gay, joy is how we survive. So many thanks to the Beister family and donors who supported the Little Blue Penguins exhibition, our fabulous team at Birch Aquarium at Scripps, partners at UC San Diego, and the Yale Program for Climate Change Communication. Thank you all.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much, Nan. I'm so inspired by the work that you're doing at Birch. Hello, everybody. My name is Jen Kretser, and I'm the Director of Climate Initiatives at the Yale Center. Our museum is located in the beautiful Adirondack Park in New York State, in the northern New York. It's actually, if you were to be here today, that's all covered in a deep layer of snow. I'm also coming to you from the traditional and contemporary lands of the Haudenosaunee people. Our mission is to ignite an enduring passion for the Adirondacks, where people and nature can thrive together and offer an example for the world. As a science museum, we're dedicated to connecting with broad audiences through multiple entry points, whether it's our live animal programs, our canoe exploration on the Racket River, our festivals. We create unique opportunities to educate, convene, and inspire, and activate, as well as activate our audiences through all of our different programs, creative communications across our 115-acre campus. To really talk to you about and share today about our climate solutions exhibit, I need to actually begin with our work that began in 2009, which is our youth climate program. Back in 2009, we launched our first Adirondack Youth Climate Summit. A youth climate summit convenes, inspires, and engages young people to learn about climate science, action, impacts, solutions, and justice. Through the youth climate summits, young people build leadership skills and create climate action plans to bring back to their schools and communities. We've been now since 2009. We've helped to inspire and catalyze over 155 summits in 23 states and 9 countries. We also have a free toolkit online if you're interested in starting one at your museum or community or institution. This one that you're seeing here is from Nashville, Tennessee. With deep support from NOAA's Environmental Literacy Grants program, we've learned a lot from working alongside youth, educators, and our community partners. And those learnings include the importance of being action-oriented and solutions-focused, to work in collaboration and partnership, to center, elevate, and listen to youth voice, to work through a lens of equity and justice, to think about and work from a place-based approach, thinking about the impacts at hand, and to also really stress the power of hope and optimism. This is the deep work with youth that we've been doing over the past, over a decade, that provided the foundation and inspiration for our climate solutions exhibition. Our climate exhibition opened with support from IMLS. This opened this past July. And in order to really understand and do this exhibition, this is where SASE came in our work with Yale, because finding common ground and taking action for climate resilience in rural communities is challenging, as there's often conflicting priorities and political views, and we really needed to understand our audience. And with the help of Kira Collective, our evaluator, we were able to utilize the SASE survey. And for those of you that are not familiar with this is the 6 Americas short survey, and it's a questionnaire and model that sorts respondents into their respective audience groups based on just 4 items or questions. It's like a short personality quiz that's to help you quickly identify which of the 6 Americas you belong to and how your views about global warming compared to the rest of Americans. This was really important for us because it provided an instant way to kind of check our audiences and to really think about where our audience sat across the spectrum. We thought it would be interesting to see what actually our staff thought where our audience sat. So the first thing we did, then I'll unpack this graph here. The first thing we did was ask our staff, what do you think our audiences are at? Where do you think they are on the spectrum? So if you see on the left here, alarmed, concerned, cautious, doubtful, dismissive, and disengaged, and our staff assumptions of where our audience are versus when we surveyed our audience, the SASE results from our audience. So you can see that we as staff, we didn't get it right. We thought our audience would be much more in the cautious, doubtful, dismissive, and disengaged if you look at those numbers. But as it turns out, they are definitely more alarmed and concerned. And we were actually wary of those results, and so we're like, well, we better do this again. So we actually did it again. And it turned out the results were essentially the same. That our visitors, and again, this is against the national average, that our visitors were really on the alarmed and concerned. And so what that did for us was to allow us to understand where our audiences are. We were able to focus our climate solutions exhibition on showing visitors what climate solutions exist and extending invitations to visitors to participate in climate solutions through climate action. So when we're envisioning the climate solutions exhibition, we wanted to think about it holistically from the entire museum. So we included a tinkering studio. We also have a NOAA Science on the Sphere, which provides that science background. We added a new film focused on local climate impacts. a significant increase in our climate change programs, a large-scale composting system, and we also worked with our cafe and store on climate messaging and products. We anchored our exhibition in storytelling, and using that storytelling approach, we thought about these questions. Are there compelling storytellers or stories in our region? Is there potential for an interactive? Is the content exhibitable? And are we considering equity and accessibility when showcasing in the solution? Is the solution available to everyone? So these 12 portraits that you see are actually, they're large scale portraits, and they actually anchor the Climate Solutions exhibition through that storytelling approach. And it sets that context by elevating these voices, and people can really connect and see the climate solutions that are happening here in the Adirondacks today. So the big idea for our exhibition is that people across sectors, generations, and backgrounds are building a web of climate solutions and are inviting all of us to find our place in the climate movement. And it turns out we were right with our front end assessment, thanks to Kira Collective, and through our summative evaluation, we learned that by taking this very direct climate solutions approach meant that our exhibition, it was very clear and effective. And it not only did visitors came away really from the exhibition recognizing the scope and scale of the solutions, and realizing that those solutions were here at hand, it also made visitors feel very hopeful about climate change by having those practical solutions that they could see. It felt like their neighbors were sharing with them what the solutions could be. So they felt it was very approachable and doable. They also appreciated how the exhibition was inclusive of many different voices and experiences related to climate change. We really did focus on the disproportionate impacts of that climate change has on frontline communities, and that was apparent from our summative evaluations. It also gave us an opportunity to highlight the young people that we work with, such as Birch Kinsey, who you see here. Birch was also an advisor on the project, and that intergenerational approach to climate change has been a real anchor for us. While many visitors welcome that invitation that everyone has a place in the climate movement, on a very personal level, visitors fall on a wide spectrum. Some were ready to take immediate action, some wanted to learn more, but in all, the exhibit provoked a sense of thoughtfulness and really encouraged people to look deeper. And again, that showed up across our exit interview process. And finally, people came away again feeling hopeful, that they're recognizing that solutions, that climate change was hard, but that solutions were at hand, and there were many different approaches, and that we needed to roll up our sleeves and do something. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nan and Jen. I knew I'd be very inspired by your presentations, and indeed I was, even though I've previously been aware of your remarkable and groundbreaking standard-setting work. So thank you both so much. I'm going to ask you all a couple of questions, and as you both know, but our audience doesn't, these are pulled from questions that people submitted while registering for this event. In some cases slightly modified, and we'll also be taking questions live. The Q&A is being moderated, as Eric mentioned, so please don't hesitate to keep interacting very actively with the conversation, because those questions are also going to be very, very eligible for the asking and answering here. What I want to start with, and Jen, I'll turn to you, because I've always been so struck by the groundbreaking work that you did on, from my perspective, intergenerational justice and the climate movement. So youth leadership, the youth summits that you all pioneered starting now more than 10 years ago. And that makes me think about other justice questions as well. How do we how do we do an ever better job of integrating questions of justice and belonging across different axes of social inequality? But I'm thinking here particularly of race and class inequality, which have intensified so much in the last 5 decades. How do we do a better and better job on an ongoing basis of integrating those understandings into our work? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as well, Nan, since I know climate justice is critical to the work you all are doing too.
Thank you so much, Miranda. I mean, I think, you know, the big question here is how do we listen? How can we listen with heart and openness and understand that we need to be in community and with community to address those issues, and to really think about, from in a museum perspective, like what is the diversity, equity, inclusion work that we're doing across our institutions? How is that showing up both internally and externally? How can we do a better job of engaging with our communities where we're sitting, and really thinking deeply about the work that we do from that perspective. I mean, I know that in the process of doing our exhibition, as well as our long work with youth, that making sure that we were bringing people in and really thinking about how we could elevate and tell those stories, which may not often be apparent, particularly where we're located in a very rural, remote part of New York State. That you know, and we wanted to do that across our exhibition, and we had an incredible team of advisors that included youth, that included our a group, the Adirondack Diversity Initiative, that is focusing on making the Adirondacks a more welcoming place for all people to live, work, and play. It included working with Indigenous leaders, and that really helped to shape and form the exhibition. And those people are elevated within the exhibition. Those stories, those voices are being told from their perspective. Through video, through actually we have rotary phones on the walls, and you can pick up and listen to people's voices. I mean, so like making sure that it's not always maybe your story to tell, but that those voices are in the room and they're able to tell that story, and that those doors are open and welcoming.
So risking 2 takeaways. Make it a focus consciously and assertively, particularly in organizations that are run by people who come from middle-class backgrounds and are white. This requires a constant ongoing focus. That's one thing I'm hearing you saying. And a second thing that I'm hearing you saying is, don't speak on behalf of communities that have been sidelined and underrepresented in this work, whatever their descriptions. Instead, invite people in to join you in creating content. Nan, does that resonate for you?
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And I can share with you what we're doing at Birch Aquarium at Scripps. We're taking a multi-leveled approach, recognizing that our guests who come to the aquarium are there to enjoy time with their loved ones. And so we're deliberately making the aquarium a welcoming and inclusive place for all people. And we're seeking to continuously improve our equity, diversity, and inclusion practices, and making accessibility and belonging part of that. And we're bringing justice into the conversation more and more. Justice for people and the living planet. You know, the rights of nature is something that I would like to talk more about. And we're also, in this multi-leveled strategy, we're using our programs, that is our programs for K-12 and our extended programs for teacher professional development and community partnerships, to go deeper on issues like extreme heat and how we adapt to and mitigate a warming planet. And we've got a project underway now with scientists at Scripps that is focused on heat waves and environmental justice and urban greening as a strategy to do that.
That is all excellent to hear. And it kind of leads into the next question that one of our audience members had submitted that struck all three of us as really critical, which is, can you talk, Nan, about your key audience as it exists now and how you program, and probably audience should be plural, and how you program in a way that's inclusive and engaging to connect with diverse experiences and values that are represented across different demographics of race, class, gender, age, amongst your visitors?
Yes, we do have a very diverse audience, really diverse in age and ethnicity, cultural background, where they're coming from, the composition of social groups. But we do recognize that we need to sort of cluster these audiences in ways so that we can meet their needs. We have a lot of families with children. We also have all adult social groups. And I think finding the common ground of what motivates people to visit us, that is what I mentioned earlier. They're looking for a fun time, you know. The aquarium is kind of a refuge from their worries. It's our little island of tranquility, and they're spending time with their friends and family. And so we want to make the space really welcoming for those social experiences, and also multi-sensory experiences, opportunities for engagement and play and conversation, and just taking in the beautiful ocean view and the surroundings, you know, the natural surroundings and the beauty of ocean life. So, you know, we kind of look for that common ground at the same time that we're tuned in to the unique needs of different audience sectors.
That makes a lot of sense. So there are some things that are maybe not completely universal. I'm thinking here of neurodiverse audiences that we all have, but that really lie at the heart of how you both have described your work, which is that sense of emotional human connection and relating to each other, and the pleasure in that, among other things, the empowerment, but also just the joy in that. Jen, thoughts to add, making our programming as inclusive as possible?
Well, Nan really did a wonderful job describing much of this in the same ways that we do. I mean, I think specifically with our climate programming, since that's what we're chatting about today, you know, we really, our solutions exhibition, you know, the content, you know, as we know, can be quite heavy, you know, when you're talking about climate science. So the solutions exhibition for us really allowed just an incredible number of entry points for people to come in and engage with the content. We also, there's a tinkering studio that's right in the middle of the exhibition. So there's something for young people to be doing, like creating, you know, thinking about how to build windmills differently, or you know, creating, you know, being creative and problem solving, and that kind of mindset we need for that whole future, our solution areas of the future. We also, so we really think about how people can engage with the content. We are really fortunate to be located in the middle of an incredible natural area, the Adirondack Park. And so that connection to nature and sort of being mindful of people's, the reason they're there, which is to be with their families, to be with the people they came with, to enjoy time together. And that they really want to also be out in nature. And so creating those intersectional points where they can have a moment, you know, a mental health moment, so to speak, that quietness in nature, those connected pieces, to feel excited about, maybe they'll see one of our otters, or maybe, you know, they'll take a canoe trip, or, you know, check out Wild Walk, or see one of our exhibits, or chat with a staff person. Is also, that personal experience has been really important, and supporting staff and understanding how to communicate about climate change, and to really be thinking about how that happens across our museum has been a really exciting journey for us as well. And I know Nan has been also working on
that. That makes a ton of sense, and it reminds me of one of our stickers on our sticker wall is actually, I'm going to spend more time in green spaces. We all know that that's a helpful thing to do for a multitude of reasons. And I remember once seeing a social science research project that came out announcing what we all already knew, which is that it's physically good for you to spend a time outdoors in nature. It's like those studies that say laughter is good for you, good for your body chemistry. You already knew it, but it's helpful to see the research nevertheless. And that takes me to our hosts today and the extraordinary research that they've done with their partners over the years. You've both touched on this, but how has that research shaped how you approach this critical terrain of bringing cultural institutional work to bear on the climate crisis and build public engagement? And then maybe I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah. Well, we talked about the 6 Americas and how public opinion is changing. And we know that because our colleagues at Yale are tracking that and understanding what those different audience segments are seeking in terms of information. People who are alarmed and concerned want to know about solutions. They want to know about actions. And we know that collective action is what is necessary right now, not to pit it against individual action, but we need to emphasize collective action to enact the transformational change that we really need. And so I lean heavily on that. The 6 Americas, that is, that people want to know about solutions, and on the other end of the spectrum, as they're still kind of doubtful and maybe curious about climate change, they want to know more about evidence and causes and consequences. So we take this kind of multifaceted approach, but really emphasizing solutions, because that is the bulk of our audience. That's uplifting, that is empowering, and that's what we need.
Fantastic. Jen, thoughts to add?
Sure. So as I described, that's the SASE survey really helped focus and direct us into it when we were doing the research and development and on the exhibition. And it also, similar to what Nan described, it allowed us to focus on those solutions. It allowed us to focus on the idea that with knowing that our audience was alarmed and concerned, that we could offer those pathways to action and helping them understand that, climate change, the solutions are happening now. We already have what we need to make a difference. And we're also, and that you have the skills in you, wherever you are in your life, that you can bring, and you just need that invitation. And we just need to be talking about it more. And understanding that many people feel alone in this space because we don't talk about it enough. And that one thing that museums can do is actually bring people together and let them know that they're not alone, and that there are pathways that they can access right now, right here in their communities, and that they can be part of this, that they can be included wherever their voices are.
That's all extremely helpful for me to hear, and I know it is for a lot of other people out there tuning in as well. I want to ask a question about that I think is related to your answers, and also address an incoming question. I think it's largely directed at me, though you all may have thoughts on it as well. Just how do we tell the hard truth without demotivating people? What's the best approach to engagement and motivation that doesn't, without overwhelming people with the really beyond words gravity of the situation that we face? And I'll connect that to a question that came in about talking about our program on reparations, and the slide that I had in my initial presentation, and whether that puts off people who are in the political middle or center. And I'll start just briefly with my own answer by saying, critical to how we approach our work is we don't shy away from telling the hard truth. In the case of climate reparations, racism is built into the climate crisis and vice versa. We think it's critical for trusted institutions to keep saying that so that it becomes part of our shared common sense. And that is much in the way that the Black Lives Matter movement shifted the needle on how many Americans of all races understand the fundamentality of white supremacy and slavery and creating the culture in the world that we see around us, we have a responsibility to play a meaningful role in telling all of the hard truths about the climate crisis, including that one, and also the intensity of the risks that we face and that we need to address quickly. And I think this will probably echo themes that you both have sounded and are likely going to elevate again, but we make that motivating rather than demotivating by giving people meaningful pathways into taking action that feels like it can land and be part of a community of action that's having ripple effects across the culture and that can support the systemic change we need. So it's not an either or. We need to embed the hard truth in that sense of being able to take meaningful action with others across time and space. Jen, how do you feel about the question of how rough what we face is and how we talk about it in a way that's candid, because that's really important, obviously, without shutting people down?
I think that there's a couple of different approaches to this. I mean, I think what we've been working from was, and so much of this came from just the work that we've done with youth. I've learned so much from that space, but really that, you know, when talking about climate change, like try to bring it down to this like local context. I think we want to create a common ground and we want to understand like what's happening in our community. We know through the work we've done that by sharing and talking about what's happening here in the Adirondacks, it's going to be very different than what's happening out in California, Birch, you know, where you are in San Diego, but that people connect to those local stories. And they often have stories that they also want to share, the changes that they've noticed. From that, you can move that conversation into really thinking about, well, what's happening in our community? What solutions are already moving that? And I think by taking that solutions framework, by helping people think that there is action that they can do right in their community, and museums have this ability of bringing people together for connecting and being kind of that hub where visitors can learn about other organizations, other work happening, and feel that they can connect and plug into something that's already existing or start their own if they're of that mindset. And so that there's that urgency piece, I hear that, but it's also like helping people to find their place in that space and feeling that they can make a difference. I mean, the demotivation happens when you feel super hopeless and you've been like doom scrolling on your phone too long about the latest climate disasters. But if you can bring it down to that local space and think about what's happening right there, what action can be taken, what solutions are at hand, like that's the way I feel like is that path forward, and will motivate people, connect people, and bring on that hope, agency, and action.
Totally agreed. And it creates a virtuous spiral that counters the spiral of climate silence. Nan, your thoughts?
Jen, there's so much that you said that just makes my heart sing.
No.
Yes, we want to put the gravity of climate change into context by, mainstreaming the climate conversation, talking about the impacts of ocean warming. And we also recognize that the medium and the message need to be well matched. And when people are in an aquarium exhibit and they might be there for a few minutes, it's not the appropriate place for Climate Science 101. So we do take that kind of ecosystem approach, a social ecosystem, that is that the aquarium plays a role in this social ecosystem, and our role is to uplift and inspire and engage. And we want to move more into that space of how do we help people find their place in the climate movement? And how do we help people understand, like Naomi Klein says, that the climate crisis is not just the greatest challenge of our lifetime, but the greatest opportunity to transform these systems that have led to the inequality and injustice that we see all around us today.
Right. And I think for us, we too just start with the assumption that people are coming to us already anxious and wanting to take action. And I think that's embedded in what you two have been saying throughout the webinar as well. That doesn't mean we shy away from telling the hard truth, but that's not what we hit people over the head with at the top of a show, or indeed anywhere in the show. We have a couple of minutes left, and that's all. And I'd like to ask a lightning round question and then move to the changes that we're seeing in the museum world also very quickly, and a call to action. I want to ask you two to put out a call to action to our colleagues. So the first lightning round question is, what kinds of actions do you recommend? And I'll say for the Climate Museum, we focus very intensively on outward facing, communicative and civic actions, because we think too often environmental politics limit Americans' sense of agency and capacity to individual consumer choice. And it's fine to do those things. It's great to talk about why you're doing them. But what we want to do is see a change in our public-facing civic culture. So that's how we decide which actions to curate. Jen.
We really try to encourage people to find their own actions. Like, what do they like? Tap into their own passion, tap into their own joy and their strengths and their skill sets, and find their own way. And like, we want to help them and support that. But I feel like the most powerful actions come from inside people, being self-determined.
That's something that we focus on as well. Nan?
We're encouraging people to have climate conversations, and drawing on the Noki work, we are emphasizing collective action and experimenting with how we can do that more and more.
And us too on that one as well. Collective action is a great pivot to our call to action. Nan, I'll start with you. What would you have the wonderful people who are assembled here today virtually do next?
I would invite all of us to think about how and where we can integrate climate messaging and opportunities for public engagement. And I've been inspired by a previous campaign by Monterey Bay Aquarium, where they say, use your voice, use your vote. And that's about the conversations and the collective action.
Great. Jen?
I would invite you to think about how you can convene new audiences at your museum and use your museum as a space to bring people together. We just hosted a food justice summit last week. We have a sustainable buildings conference coming up. And of course, you could also start a youth climate summit if you so choose, but find ways to be in your community and think about your museum as a convening space and a place to catalyze action. Just think about the work we could all do if we put our minds to it all together across the country to be a catalyst for this kind of work.
There's just enormous transformational capacity in the world of cultural institutions. And I'll just add a very quick note to those of you out there who are not museum professionals or practitioners or cultural institutional professionals or practitioners, but visitors with favorite places that you go to, let them know. Because just like Jen had to run her SASE test a couple of times to believe the results, they probably think you don't want to hear about climate and you don't want it to be part of their programming. They may be nervous about putting it on. Let them know. Break the climate silence with your favorite cultural institution. Thank you all so much. And now I'm going to hand it back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Miranda, for moderating the conversation, and Jen and Nan for all of your insights. We'll send everyone a follow-up email after this event with the recording and information on the next event of our spring speaker series, where we hope you'll join us for a panel on communicating the Inflation Reduction Act. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you all.
Thank you.